Now, we will go to our first speaker, Professor K. Purushottam Reddy sir, to speak on democracy through the ages. Over to you, sir.
So thank you very much. Really, it's a very important day today. You made an excellent start for the subject, and thank you so much for the kind words said about me. We are all gathered here to somehow protect the flame of democracy. And I sincerely thank the United Nations for having been in the forefront, trying to bring the world together, discussing major issues and trying to evolve a consensus, whether it is international peace or trying to make the world a better place to live by giving an agenda for the nations of the world. Initially, the MDGs or the Millennium Development Goals, and slightly before that, they gave a small prescription known as Agenda 20. Then we come to the present agenda before the world, and that is Sustainable Development Goals. We are in the 5th year, and incidentally, goal number 16, it talks about peace, justice, level playing ground, strong institutions, rule of law, and so on. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful introductory remarks. I am focusing on the book of Jayapal Reddy Garu. I had one advantage with him. Together we were both in the same college. And he was our president, not only the president of the college, but he also became the president of the entire university. Those days we had university elections in Osman University. And he was the president of the entire university, which means spread over the entire Telangana. Such was his leadership, and he would inspire youngsters those days on the higher values of life. He wrote this book slightly, after becoming the best parliamentarian of the country. All the ideas were constantly with him. Maybe he was mentally fine-tuning them because he himself was an activist and trying to experiment. But towards the later part of his life, he very seriously involved himself and he started writing. This book, 10 Ideologies, he wrote it because one sentence I want to read from the cover of the book, and that explains why this particular book is so very significant. In his own words, today, ideology seems to have become irrelevant. However, he feels that if social ideologies are extinguished, primordial cultural identities based on religion, race, or nation will resurrect themselves, thereby fragmenting society further. And this he was against, because the world has already witnessed during the First World War, Second World War, particularly Second World War, which was fought in the name of ideology. And we had all kinds of ideologies, right from fascism, Nazism, communism, democracy, and so on. And the World War can be described as a battle of ideologies, but not fought intellectually, but fought with deadly weapons, resulting in millions of deaths. In his book on 10 ideologies, there is a chapter on democracy, and my humble request to all the youngsters who have joined today, We'll make the soft copy available in due course, and I request all of them to please read this wonderful chapter of democracy, because here Jaipal Reddy Garu traces the idea of democracy over a very long period of 2,500 years, 2,500 years. So, friends, in view of the limited time, I wish to state that whenever there is an idea at the global level, simultaneously, a lot of people get the same idea. As, for example, when we are talking about democracy, in our own country, we had a republic known as Vaishali in Bihar of today. And Vaishali was a wonderful republic. And it was a case study of direct democracy. Similarly, in Greece, in Athens was very, very popular, very famous example of a direct democracy. However, there were some limitations. We always need to appreciate an idea in the context of its time. I'm not judging Athens with today's standards, but Athens 2,500 years ago, depending, taking those standards into consideration, it was an ideal democracy. And though citizenship was not universal, it's not like India today, where everybody is equal when it comes to political voting. There were restrictions, there was slavery, and women were not still allowed to vote. So it was only the universal application was limited to male, and the number of citizens was approximately 1,20,000. I'm not saying that they would all the 1,20,000 would gather at a particular place. No, but depending upon the issue, any citizen could go and directly make his presentation. So that's how, depending upon the problem, the issues, the citizens, within inverted commas, they were free to participate. And those days, Athens was very lucky to have a great leader by name Pericles. Pericles is one of the greatest of the great, a great orator, one who stood by the suffering people, always trying to uplift the poorest of the poor. And those days, of course, there were elections, he was elected, but not once. The greatest of the Greek political thinkers, they have commented that Pericles was so popular that he could have been endlessly elected. Endlessly. Unfortunately, after about 25 years of his leadership, there was plague in Athens, and that was the time when Athens was fighting a war with Sparta, and Sparta was a military dictatorship. Unfortunately, plague destroyed Athens' leadership, and Pericles also died. And after his death, Athenian democracy ended. Now the question is, their democracy had taken roots, but unfortunately, there were no strong institutions to carry forward the message of democracy. Athenian democracy ended with Pericles. So that is why we should not be focusing on individuals. Jaipal Reddy Garu is very particular. He mentions that if only there were strong institutions created, the message of democracy as a form of government would have survived. Well, that did not happen. Now we go a little further. All of us, whenever we are reminded of ancient Greece, we are reminded of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and Alexander. The first three were great thinkers. Alexander was, he became I won't say great, but he was a conqueror. Socrates, I'm not going into the details of these three thinkers right now. It's not necessary. Socrates was a philosopher par excellence. And the very fact that he was condemned to death by the rulers then, that is, so the ideas and the questions that Socrates raised, it was causing inconvenience to the rulers of the day. And they sentenced him to death, and they asked him to drink a cup of poison, which he, he took willingly. But then he gave a great speech. That particular speech is all-time great. So we need to understand that Socrates has been silenced, but then the voice of the people cannot be silenced. Dissent will always be there. Free thinking has got to be encouraged. After Socrates, the next major figure is Plato, a great thinker, and his books, Republic, Laws and Statesmen. The first one deals with a utopia. There's no mention of democracy there because in the Republic, it was all a government by the philosopher king and the guardians. But his later books they speak volumes about his increasing interest in some kind of a continuity, some kind of a solid rules and regulations. Though apologetically, Plato mentions about statesmen, and he also speaks about laws. But definitely these two books were not his best. Plato is known the world over because of his wonderful dream, that is Republic. Then we have Aristotle. About Aristotle, it is said that he analyzed 120 constitutions. Now, the point is, 2,500 years ago, 120 states had constitutions. And Aristotle, when he read all the constitutions, he classified the constitutions. So that only means that those days, mostly they were city-states, and each city had its own constitution. And Aristotle's contribution is in many fields. He can be described as a forerunner of the concept of the theory of separation of powers. He spoke about revolutions. He spoke about the middle classes as a bulwark against revolutions. He spoke about how governments change from bad to better. And he also spoke about the citizenship responsibilities. Friends, we go a little further. I'm not interested in Alexander. But unfortunately, what happened after that is the entire Greece, which was captured initially by Alexander, was captured and dominated by the Roman Empire. And about the Roman Empire, we need to understand that till Julius Caesar came onto the stage, Rome had a history of representative government. Again, not on ideal terms. We cannot judge those governments by today's standards. But definitely they were senators, they were consuls. Julius Caesar was a consul, and he was killed or eliminated because there was this lurking fear that Caesar may become an emperor. But after his death, the Roman democracy became the Roman Empire. And that continued for nearly 2000 years. Friends, we go a little further. Here we have to understand the role of the church. And, after particularly, the rise of the papacy, the fall of Constantinople, say 1400 years from after Jesus Christ. In the 15th century, when Constantinople fell, Constantinople is today's Istanbul, the clerics of, Istanbul today, the Constantinople, they had to flee with their books. And those days, Bible was the most important book. So with all whatever religious books they had to flee for their life. So as they were fleeing towards the western side, they took their very important books, manuscripts, etc. And as luck would have it, the printing press came into being. And with the advent of the printing press, the Bible was printed first. That was the first book to be printed. And very soon, what was originally limited to, a few clergymen possessing the Bible, very soon hundreds and thousands of people started reading the Bible. We can call it as the beginning of the democratization of the Christian religion. But meanwhile, the church itself got split into two groups. One is the Catholic group, and the other is the Orthodox church. The Catholic group was subjected to certain kinds of they were exposed to new ideas, particularly when it comes to Renaissance and subsequently Reformation. On one side, they were accepting new technologies. So the Catholics started slowly becoming democratic, and they were also taking to modernization. Whereas Orthodox Church, Jayapal Reddy wonderfully explains, in Europe, the entire northern part of Europe was under the grip of the Orthodox Church. For example, right now, right from what we call the Scandinavian countries, the entire former entire USSR was under the Orthodox Church. And our Orthodox Church did not permit free thinking. And that is why the ideas of Renaissance and Reformation and the ideas, the early winds of democracy did not reach that particular area. And Jayapal Reddy Garu wonderfully explains how even in the 21st century, even today, as we are all discussing this wonderful subject, the entire Northern Europe, the former Soviet Russia area, is blissfully ignorant of democracy. Even today, Russia, though it has elections periodically, Russia is never known as a participatory democracy. Okay, friends, what happened in the Catholic Church subsequently is that some of the priests started selling certificates to their followers, saying that if you wish to have all facilities in heaven, you need to pay so much of money, and these people would give the certificates. And illiterate people, innocent people, having faith in God, always wishing to have a better place after death, willing to enjoy life in heaven within inverted commas, they were shelling out huge sum of money, and they were purchasing. Okay. This led to Protestantism. That is, the thinking people among the Catholics, they started questioning, what is this nonsense? How can you sell certificates? This is not fair. You are cheating. And therefore, they protested. And that protest became a great revolution. And that's why today Protestantism is extremely popular. More number of people it attracts the intelligentsia among the Catholic community. Okay. I have to mention Jayapal Reddy Garu was tracing the idea of democracy. And frankly speaking, as a student of political science, I'm really grateful for the wonderful service he has rendered. He made it everything easy for us to follow. And here he goes on to mention three revolutions. One is the English Revolution. And this English Revolution is in two parts. First, when it was in the 14th century, Magna Carta was signed between the king and the noblemen, and the king very, reluctantly started sharing some of his very important powers with the nobles of the day. I'm not saying it was a big leap forward, but definitely it resulted in the weakening of the monarch, and to that extent it is democratic. Then we come to, I'll come to the English Revolution slightly later again. This is the first part. We come to the American Revolution. Initially, it started as, as the American War of Independence. But very soon, the intelligentsia, particularly Thomas Jefferson, he took the lead and he started speaking about democracy. And his contribution there is very, very high. Later on, he himself became the president. He became the third president of America. But frankly speaking, his contribution in the initial years is one of the best. And in the American contribution, it is a tribute to the division of separation of powers as propounded by, here there are about 3-4 important thinkers. One is Locke. American Constitution owes a lot to John Locke, that is one. Secondly, Montesquieu subsequently. Of course, they were inspired by the encyclopedia, the group which published the encyclopedia. They were known as the encyclopedic group. Voltaire was one of the high priests of the French Revolution. Voltaire, Locke, Rousseau, and a whole lot of others. They were, they created an environment where there was tremendous intellectual churning. There is a very important quotation in Jayapal Reddy's work. In his own words, he mentions, unless people come together and discuss, it is not necessary that they should agree with everything. They should differ, then there should be a tremendous discussion. And this intellectual, churning is very, very important. It creates the right condition, right atmosphere for the survival of democracy. So American Constitution came into being. Subsequently, I come to the, Gettysburg speech of Abraham Lincoln, where we all are we continuously remind ourselves that democracy is by the people, for the people. Of the people, by the people, and for the people. But normally we tend to forget the last part. See, what Jayapal Reddy was emphasizing is, yes, the government should be of the people, by the people. But he went on to say that it should also be for the people, also be. See, the word also be, he was focusing on that. Okay, government of the people, by the people, but it should also be for the people. I request everyone to note this because we are living at a time when governments are functioning to please a few corporates. No, that is not democracy. Democracy means that the government should work for the people. Every decision, it should be in the interest of the people, not in the interest of a few corporates. Okay. Then we come to 17th century, again UK, and there, in 1649, the king, Charles I, was asked to come to Parliament. There were allegations against him, and there was a big inquiry, and ultimately he was found guilty. And in the January of 1649, he was killed, executed. This point is very important because we talk about British monarchy. Even today, they have some kind of a monarchy left. They call it as the constitutional monarchy. But in a real democracy, that is not necessary. But anyway, the King of England was executed. And after that, they had Cromwell, who pursued democracy. And they were also wonderful uh, poets like John Milton, and we have Wordsworth. These two, poets. They could be described as the high priest of democracy. They were trying to emphasize the importance of equality in a political system. Simultaneously, as I pointed out in Europe, Protestantism was picking up under the leadership of Martin Luther. On one side, they were trying to destroy the vestiges of papacy, full control of the church and all that. And Martin Luther played a great role. But simultaneously, in France, it was in the crucible of France, we say. France became the testing ground of several ideologies. And there we find more than 100 thinkers continuously discussing, working, interacting, and they were trying to find solutions to the France of their times. Unfortunately for the monarchy, they could not see the spirit of the times, and there was a tremendous public upsurge. And it is said that when people went to the palace demanding bread, yes, we want bread, we want bread. And the queen, from the balcony seems to have said, if you don't have bread, you eat cakes. And that was the starting point of the French Revolution. And hundreds of members of the nobility, so-called nobility, or nobility within inverted commas, they were slaughtered, they were guillotined. But that apart, the idea of democracy picked up from the French Revolution with the slogans like liberty, equality, and fraternity. And I remember, friends, during our times, that is Jaipal Reddy Garu, my senior, when I was there in the college, we were really inspired by the slogans of liberty, equality, and fraternity. I mean, we had a cause, a purpose, an ideology, a framework, and we had committed ourselves to these values. Maybe because, I started my education in 1950, and that is also the period of the Constitution. India started implementing the Constitution. So there were very high hopes, and the spirit of India's freedom struggle was still there in the air. We had tall personalities, wonderful, great speakers like Justice Krishna Iyer, Justice Bhagavati, and Gajendra Gadkar, Nana Palkiwala. These people, these, apart from being judges, they would reach out to the common man and try to explain the Constitution and the importance of value and the preamble and so on. So we go a little further. We come to the 20th century, and there we realize that in spite of the fact, the people of the world were trying to, adjust their lifestyles and work peacefully towards democracy, it so happened that quite a few countries were taken possession of by people who later on became dictators. And this we notice in Germany. Hitler took over, and slowly he settled down as one of the worst tyrant in history. He conquered the entire political power in Germany. Then he expanded in Europe, and he became the biggest killer. Simultaneously in Italy, another person, Mussolini, and in Russia, in the name of a pro-people ideology, communism, a dictator emerged by name Stalin. And all dictators are the same, whether it is a monarch, whether somebody rises in the name of some ideology like Nazism, fascism, communism, or even military dictatorship. You know, dictators are dictators and they are intolerant, and anybody who raises a question, you know, that person is eliminated. So what happened is we all think in India that Europe was always democratic, or you know, Europe is the one which gave us these ideas of democracy. Definitely, yes, when we look at the French Revolution, when we look at the American Revolution, yes, even English Revolution, yes. But then again, we need to realize that in all these countries, women did not have votings till the 20th century. That is, they were definitely democratic. I mean, they must be good when compared to their own times, but by today's standards, they can't be. And we need to realize, and you know, Jaypal Reddy, he very clearly says, 1974, Greece became democratic. That is, a country which boasted of Athenian democracy, it had to wait for more than 2000 years, and it was only in 1974 Greece became democratic. 1945, Italy, after Mussolini, became a democracy. Well, we became free in 1947 and we adopted a constitution which became implementable in 1950. That is, we were not very behind. Italy became a democratic country in 1945. And you know, Portugal became a democracy in 1968 and Spain became a democracy in 1975. Friends, compared to India, many of the European countries became democratic later. We are ahead of them. Now, here, there's one point I would like to mention. In his own words, I request all of you to note. Jaypal Reddy says that it is important to recognize that a huge intellectual ferment is a necessary condition for liberation from a medieval mindset. Tremendous intellectual churning has to go on continuously. It's not as though it's not just for one day or fun. It's not just one day we observe a day for democracy, but continuously we should be thinking about democracy. We need to be eternally vigilant on this very important subject. And I appreciate Jaypal Reddy garu for mentioning this. We come to another important point. Though America was a democracy, England and France, you know, we always quote them, we appreciate them to that extent, fine. But we need to realize that democracy did not come to them overnight. It came, piece by piece in installments. And here I would like to mention that, the 1832 Reforms Bill, you know, it was presented by the working class of UK. And initially, the electoral vote, there were only 5 lakh voters in UK then. And after the struggles, 1832 subsequently, we realized that very, very reluctantly they started giving voting rights to the working class in the villages also. And the number of votes increased to 8 lakhs 13,000. But then the Chartist movement, that is when the working class submitted a list of what they wanted, what they pleaded for. Number one is manhood suffrage. Even they could not think of a universal adult franchise. They demanded only manhood suffrage, annual parliaments, vote by secret ballot, no property qualifications, then payment to members of parliament, and equal electoral districts. Though some of these things are valid for all times, the very first one, they could not demand their thinking was limited, the workers demanded only manhood suffrage. And this was in the middle of 19th century. Of course, some of the British prime ministers were quick enough to accept them. Benjamin Disraeli, he agreed, and later on, the manhood suffrage came into being in the 20th century, 1918, and women became voters in 1928. That is, even though England is supposed to be so-called mother of parliaments and all that, but in reality, women voters are not there. Means what does it mean? 50% of the people did not have the right to vote, and then they were property. Property was one of the considerations for voting. So all this we have to take into consideration. But one concludingly, I have to mention about India, because this is where Jayapal Reddy Garu is at his best. His understanding of India, because please remember, friends, that he was a product of his times. And particularly those days, there were tall intellectual giants like Rajgopalachari. And I remember Jayapal Reddy holding a copy of Swarajya. Swarajya was a publication of Rajaji those days. And he would always carry what we call Bhavan's journal and Reader's Digest and all that. And those days, these books reflected democratic writings, apart from statesmen and all that. So here, his analysis of India it makes interesting reading. Why India is an exception? Because, remember friends, we all became free 1947, and from 1950 we have a constitution, right? But there were several other countries which became free along with us. There was this Pakistan, there was Nepal. So particularly he gives the example of Pakistan and Nepal. And he scorches the argument that India continues to be a democracy because we learned democratic values from the Britishers because we were their colony. Okay, if that is the factor, then Pakistan also was a colony. Then why did not Pakistan survive as a democracy? Pakistan invariably ended as a military dictatorship quite a few times. Then there are some people say because India is a Hindu majority state, there is what is known as the theory of karma and dharma and the Hindu ethos. And then if we accept that, then Jayapal Reddy gives the example of Nepal. Nepal is a hugely Hindu populated state, but Nepal also was not a good ground for the flourishing of democracy. So these are some points we need to be careful. Then what is it that made what is it that makes India so great or so comfortable when we are talking about democracy? So he analyzes and says that it is India's struggle for freedom. India was very, very lucky to have had a galaxy of top leaders. It's not easy thing, right from 1857, the the social reform movements. Initially, Jhansi Ki Lakshmi, they protested, they waged a war. But subsequently, a lot of the Bhakti movement, the Raja Ram Mohan Roy movement, and then Arya Samaj movement, and like this, tremendous sensitization, social awakening took place. And by 1885, when the first Indian National Congress under the name in the Indian Association was established. It was once again Indian Association was established by a Britisher. Okay, fine, but that was the need of the hour, and one platform came into being, and people of India started, particularly the English-educated Indians, they started converging on that platform, and slowly it started highlighting the problems of the people of India. Initially, the moderates like Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Madhav Govind Ranade, Dadabhai Naoroji, Firoz Shah Mehta, like that. But after 1905, when the Britishers wanted to divide Bengal, a galaxy of great thinkers like Sri Aurobindo, Bipin Chandrapal, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and Lala Lajpat Rai, they all came into it. And inspired by these, several youngsters came. And these youngsters were, they are dubbed as terrorists, which is wrong. They were people with a lot of emotions. They were committed to the cause of this country. And they sacrificed their life at the altar of Mother India. And that is Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, and the galaxy of the people who happily Alluri Sita Ramaraju. It's not a joke, when a person decides to sacrifice his most important thing, that is life, at the altar of the country, at the altar of Mother India. And the very idea of Mother India was given by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, nourished by Aurobindo, and great stalwarts like Rabindranath Tagore and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So it is not possible to take all the names, but hats off to the galaxy of who is who. And then enters Gandhi. And because Jayapal Reddy Garu, as a contemporary, I have always seen a Gandhi in him. Please remember that he was a Gandhian to the core, a person who believed in non-violence. And about Gandhi, he says that Gandhi is the one who connected India. Till then, India's freedom struggle was isolated in different parts of the country, and it is only Gandhi who connected, and that is why he becomes the father of the nation. And one word about Gandhi, he says, see, that is the greatness of the person Mahatma Gandhi, the person Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, that he could attract the attention of the entire country. Everybody, he was, people in India, the poorest of the poor, the illiterate, people living in the remotest corners of the country, they saw in Gandhi a person whom they can trust. And that is why when Gandhiji gave a call of civil disobedience, non-violent struggles, millions of people quoted arrest. Nothing like this ever happened anywhere in the world. This is what Jayapal Reddy says. And did this did not happen for one day, but for nearly 25 to 30 years, continuously, wave after wave, Indians coming and getting arrested, getting beaten up, sitting in a satyagraha or performing a hunger strike. And that was also the time when India was making its constitution. Don't ever think, friends, that freedom came just like that. No, it is not by anybody's charity. It is we, the people, our ancestors. They have struggled very, very hard, and India is a showcase. Nowhere in the world, this point is very important. Ekkada kuda, nowhere in the world there is a parallel to Indian freedom struggle, and the credit goes to Mahatma Gandhi and the tall leadership that he promoted, and the values, values, it created an ethical atmosphere. Of course, every other factor may have helped. English education, top leadership of India going to UK, studying language, law, exposed to British parliamentary practices, all that is fine. But, 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 yes, it is India's freedom struggle, a very unique struggle. And okay, we become free. We have a parliamentary democracy. And continuously, we are discussing democracy, but we are also discussing a tall personality of our contemporary times. It's not a joke that Jayapal Reddy, as a person, was elected 7 times to Parliament and 5 times to Assembly, twice the president of the University Students' Organization. And continuously, he was an inspiration. He did not agree with Mrs. Indira Gandhi when emergency was declared. That is, he walked the talk. చాలా మంది మాట్లాడతారు కానీ చెయ్యరు. But he walked the talk. And one last point, which he mentions in the chapter very clearly, when he quotes John Locke with regards to property, he says that in the days to come, this property clause, because that is likely to be abused by the corporates. And he withstood, when it came to taking on the Reliance as a corporate entity. We all know that Jayapal Reddy stood for the country and not for the corporates. I thank my friend Pushpa Kumar Garu and the organizers for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I don't know how to thank you that, you have given a very detailed historical account of the democracy, the struggles we faced all over the world, how people in different countries had to sacrifice. And when it came to India, and how we got into democracy. And, it is the birthplace of democracy also, as you have pointed out, that Vaishali was the, the example that we can always boast of. And this is the place that it thrived. And we showed to the world that how democracy could function. But even though due to historical reasons,
You said it,
so many,
sir.
yes,
You
sir.
said it.
Yes. And due to historical reasons, that could not continue for some time. And now, after independence, we were able to, revive it, and we have been living with the help of, the constitutional commitments. We are upholding the democracy in our country. And now, it is in shambles. It is in, great difficulties now. I think, this is where, your, the foundation that now you have created, and the points that now you have, shared with us will really, prompt us to think more deeper in identifying how we can, really engage ourselves in shaping this democracy for the benefit of everyone, protecting it and upholding it for, taking the country to a, greater height. Thank you very much, sir, for this, very, very insightful talk.